What's up, guys? Welcome into DawgsCentral on a Tuesday night. I'm Graham Coffee. As always, I'm here to talk about the latest and greatest happenings in the Georgia football universe. Hope you guys are all doing well. Hope you're having a good summer. We are getting closer and closer to football season. SEC Media Days, less than a month out now. NCAA 25 video game release, less than a month out now. So lots to look forward to on the horizon. But before that, we got lots of recruiting happening. We've got games to look ahead to. We got rosters to look at. We'll get into full-on preview season here shortly if you're over on DawgsCentral, and I hope you are. Excuse me. Did a big article this week on new Georgia transfer tight end Benjamin Urasek. Really interesting player. To be truthful with you guys, just a lot better than I realized once I went through his tape. Talking about a guy with a lot of yak potential. 8.5 yards after the catch per reception on screens in 2022. That same year, Brock Bowers was 8.7 yards after the catch on screens. So, not saying he's Brock Bowers because there's only one Brock Bowers, but you are looking at a player who I think can do a lot of the same things for the Georgia offense from a schematic standpoint and create sort of similar matchup issues to what Brock created. So will be interesting to watch. And I think, somebody that maybe is flying under the radar a little bit. Hello, Craig. Good to see you. Craig in the comments says he was texting with one of Isiah Gibson's coaches earlier, and he did not know did not know shit about Gibson's recruitment. So, well, that checks out. That makes not two of us, but yeah, that would be the big news of the day. So I'll jump right into that. Isiah Gibson, 5-star edge prospect out of the state of Georgia. Went out to Southern Cal for a visit with fellow Peach State 5-star defensive tackle Justice Terry back in, I believe, February. And at the time Terry was committed to Georgia, Gibson was seen as a UGA lean. They both got out there, and it seemed like something happened on that visit. They got excited. They got in the moment. They were enjoying the Southern California sunshine in February, and both those guys committed to the Trojans on the spot that weekend. Kind of sent shockwaves would probably be too big of a word for it, but it was definitely a surprise that the recruiting world paid close attention to. In general, it seems like Lincoln Riley has kind of gotten in the habit of trying to mess with Georgia wherever he can. Sometimes that's been on the recruiting trail by, offering large NIL deals, or somebody related to USC, I should say, not necessarily Lincoln Riley himself, but USC has made some strong NIL pitches to different Georgia prospects from the state of Georgia. And it seems like somebody associated with the program has also made some strong NIL pitches to guys on Georgia's roster at different times when transfer portal windows have been nearing opening. And I'm just very curious to see how that all kind of plays out, to be honest with you. I know that's not about Gibson necessarily, but it just seems like Lincoln Riley keeps poking the bear. And my personal experience of covering Kirby Smart is that that's not the dude you really want to mess with. So I'm curious if USC continues to tamper with sort of the things that are going on in Georgia's world. Part of it's recruiting, obviously. Everybody that recruits is going to try and recruit the best players. So I don't mean that necessarily, but it just seems like something a little bit deeper going on there. And that included Georgia 2026 Georgia quarterback commit Jared Curtis popped up out in LA this weekend, was posting pictures with him and Lincoln Riley on social media. So it seems like an ongoing theme that maybe a fun storyline if Georgia gets to face USC in a playoff somewhere down the road. What's up, Joseph? Good to see you. Thanks for joining in tonight. I hope you guys are doing well. So with Gibson, I think the interesting thing is I'm not surprised he decommitted from USC. It seemed like that was kind of an emotional decision. I'm not even sure if his parents or, sort of his camp, so to speak, was fully aware that he was going to commit while he was there. That sort of happened in a whirlwind. He never even scheduled an official visit with USC for this summer. So I don't think USC was surprised that he decommitted. I don't think anybody was really surprised that he decommitted. The question is what happens now, right? He is in Columbus, Ohio at the moment on a visit there. He's got an official visit coming up to Oklahoma this weekend. And then past that, it's been Georgia seems like they're doing the most consistent job of recruiting him right now. He's been on campus twice in the last month in Athens, had a really good official visit. I think Georgia's done a good job of sort of selling the family on the non-football aspects. Georgia's always going to preach development, especially at a position where, Trevon Walker's not a traditional edge in the fact that he was a 270-pound mutant that ran down on kickoff coverage at that weight, but still, you're talking about into the line of scrimmage, similar type players, and I think Gibson is a guy that Georgia's going to look and say, hey, we had Nolan Smith, we had Trevon Walker as the number 1 overall pick. We know how to get you where you want to go, and Michael Williams is going to be another one of those after this season who will be a highly drafted player at that kind of edge outside linebacker position in the Georgia defense. I don't honestly have a strong read on Gibson's timetable right now. I don't think that, he's about to pop or make a decision. I like where Georgia is. I think Georgia's kind of done the most consistent job of recruiting him, but South Carolina has kind of snuck into that race, it seems like, in recent months as well. It feels like there are, Tennessee's trying to kind of get into that. Anytime Ohio State gets a kid on campus, you gotta respect that. You gotta kind of monitor it and see what the after effects are of the visit. So it will be interesting to kind of see how things play out with him over the next month or two. It seems like a lot of these kids want to make these decisions before they start their senior season now. So maybe that will happen with him. Maybe it won't. I don't know. But until then, I think it's going to be very, very back and forth potentially with him. I don't know that anybody has a really strong read on what he's doing. So we'll see what happens. All right. Moving on, going to get into some questions. Craig, you just mentioned the Lamborghini tweet. So for those of you that haven't seen, I tweeted something, I believe it was yesterday. I saw an interview that Steve Sarkisian did with Joel Klatt on his podcast. And, Joel Klatt is the Fox Big Ten guy. So I was kind of surprised to see new SEC entrant Texas putting their coach on the Fox Big Ten podcast. But Joel Klatt's got a great platform, talented guy. So anyways, in this podcast interview, Steve Sarkisian, I want to get his quote exactly right. He said, NIL should be the last reason why you choose to go to a school. And then I remembered that a couple weeks ago, there was a video that got passed around the internet of Texas recruits arriving at the facility for an official visit. And to get in the facility, they had to walk past this giant row on either side of Lamborghinis that were being revved up and, sexy cars, beautiful cars, obviously, if that's your thing. So I just felt like that was a little bit of a contrarian statement. And I don't think that that's a controversial or unfair thing to say. Texas has been one of the strongest programs from an NIL standpoint since NIL came into existence. And I think that, why wouldn't they be? They're Texas. There's a lot of people with money that want to have an influence or a positive impact on Texas football. So they should use that to their advantage, and they have, and that's fine. But I don't see any other programs at all. I don't know of anyone else that's got literally some, car dealer coming to the facility with luxury automobiles and revving them up and walking recruits past them to get in the facility. Like, you can go check my timeline. If you watch the video, the kids literally have to walk past the cars to get into the building where the cheerleaders are standing there with their burnt orange and white pom-poms, and Sarkeesian's standing there waving, in his burnt orange suit or whatever he's wearing. Like, it's a very, very, I think it's a little bit disingenuous to say, like, don't make decisions off NIL. And also, hey, look at this carrot that we're dangling right here with all of these Lamborghinis. And apparently they've got the Porsche and the Mercedes dealers coming to one of their upcoming official visit weekends, maybe this coming weekend. At least that's what a Texas fan said in the replies to the tweet. So I just feel like you're kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth there. I think coaches would tell you that, easy come, easy go with some of this NIL stuff. But like, I feel like Texas, maybe more than any program in the country, aside from, actually, I don't know, honestly, maybe more than any program in the country, I think Texas has really embraced NIL and they've used NIL as a recruiting tool. So don't kind of, I don't know, claim. I wouldn't say he was claiming a moral high ground necessarily. I don't think he was saying NIL is wrong. I think he was talking more about, program fit and all of that stuff. But I just felt like that was a little bit contradictory and it turned me off. So that's my opinion there. Sorry, Texas fans. I know that you did not like that. A lot of you are angry. I'll just tell you guys this, though, Texas fans, like, anytime a tweet gets liked by 3.9 thousand people, generally it does a pretty good job of capturing the overall kind of popular sentiment on an issue. And that's what happened with that tweet. So I feel like what I said was pretty fair. Like, it was hypocritical. All right, moving on. We are going to go to some questions, and that goes for any of you in the chat. If you have questions, if it's a recruiting related question, try to answer that. I've got questions loaded up from DawgsCentral subscribers, but just throw them in and I'll see what I can do with them. We are going to start with UGA All-Americans potentially for 2025. This is kind of a fun question. I'm sorry, not 2025, 2024. I got recruiting on the mind. I apologize for that. So, question is, if you had to pick one each from offense, defense, and special teams to be a first-team All-American for Georgia this season, who are you picking? This is from Dog God. Thank you for your participation. I think for offense, the obvious answer is going to be Carson Beck. I mean, I know that's probably not like the most fun answer or the most illuminating answer, but truth of the matter is that he is being talked about as the first quarterback taken in this next draft for a reason, and it's because he's 6'4", 6'4.5", and he's up to 230 pounds, and he laces the ball really well to multiple levels of the field, and he's got a lot of weapons around him coming into this season. I think Georgia's got more receiving talent and deeper receiving talent coming into 2024 than they've had at any point in the Kirby Smart era, really. And, I think people look at Brock Bowers leaving. That's legit. I also think that Georgia will still have tight ends that can make teams pay for trying to put too much attention on the wide receivers. I think they still have tight ends that can beat linebackers. So as far as kind of how things add up from a matchup standpoint, I don't think there's going to be this massive drop off. I don't think Georgia's going to have anybody that's, running 75-yard end around touchdowns this year. Although Jurasik, I did find out that's how you say his name, Benjamin Jurasik, not Jurasik. Jurasik did have a 50-yard touchdown on an end around when he was at Stanford. So they kind of found like another mutant tight end that also happens to be really good with the ball in his hands. I just think you look at you look at this kind of group for Georgia coming into this year, and Beck should really excel. If I had to pick one guy on the offense, not Carson Beck, that I think, this is going to be an All-American, I would say probably say Tate Ratledge or Ernest Green. I think Ratledge has a little bit more profile because he's been in the sport for a while now. But I think Ernest Green's going to be really, really good. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's gone after next season, because that'll be his third year in Athens on campus. And I think he is going to look like a first round left tackle. As far as other skill players, probably ETN would be the guy, right? That makes sense to me. Moving towards the defensive side of the ball, I think Starks and Michael are the two obvious All-American possibilities for Georgia in 2024. Malachi is Malachi. I mean, he's been flirting with the "What's up, George?" I should have told you to come on. Hope you're doing well, man. Good to see you. Someday we'll record another 100 Sanford podcast. Maybe someday soon. We'll see. But yeah, for All Americans on defense, I think it's got to be Starks or Michael Williams. Michael is that guy, and they're moving him towards that sort of more towards a true outside linebacker position where he'll be a stand-up pass rusher on third downs. I think he's going to rack up a lot of sacks. George, do you think CJ Allen will be a All-American? That's definitely fair. He's got the physical gifts for it. I'm definitely interested to see sort of if he takes that like big leap that he probably should take coming into his sophomore year. All right, on special teams, I got to go with the punter Thorson. I mean, there's not that many choices, but look, I still think about that punt that he hit against Tennessee in 2022, where he coffin cornered it from like 70 something yards away and backed them up, and it led to the Jalen Carter sack fumble that probably should have been a safety but wasn't, and then it led to a punt with a short field. And I think the first play after that punt, McConkey broke loose in man coverage for a touchdown on a double move. So I just think that Georgia's got a really good punter, and I think people will probably be aware of him because Georgia's going to play in so many high-profile games, and I think people will also be aware of him because Georgia's going to have a good defense that if you back teams up, it's going to be really hard for them to get out of their own end, or even harder for them to go drive the field and score. So he should get credit on broadcasts and such. So those are my takes. All right. Preseason predictions for what UGA players get drafted in the 2025 NFL draft. This is from Hunter. This is a really difficult question because I've actually I've kind of had a working list based on like things that I hear about guys around the program and all of that. Sorry. Yeah. So if you go in and you really start thinking about the draft, all right, Carson Beck, certainly, first round potential, if not first round, certainty. I would say highly likely a first round quarterback. Ernest Green, who we were just talking about, I think is a first rounder to second rounder. We'll see how he tests out and all that. He is a little shorter for an offensive tackle. I think he's not like in that 6'6", 6'7" range. I think he's more in that 6'4.5" to 6'5.5" range. So maybe that holds it back, but he's got the long arms and sweet feet, I think, mean a lot more at that position, at least in my opinion. Ra Thomas, I know that that's somebody that not everybody's talking about, or, kind of got forgotten down the stretch last year because he was hurt and had that foot surgery. But Ra Thomas is a really good player. He's got the prototypical like outside receiver size, speed, length, catchability, body control. he could very, very well be, I think, a guy that I don't know if he's going to be a first rounder, but he's certainly going to be a potential draft pick. I don't think that's outrageous to say at all. And Rara is also a guy that I've just heard a lot about this offseason. It seems like James Coley coming into the program has been really good for him. Not to say that BMAC wasn't well respected and liked by his players, because he certainly was, but I think Coley has kind of brought in like some things for these guys where it's super detailed, and Rara's been working a lot on his first step off the line of scrimmage, working a lot on his releases. I thought it was interesting in the spring game, the throw that Carson Beck made to Thomas up the boundary on that last drive when they were in kind of a 1-minute drill situation. It really seemed like that was a throw that we didn't really see Carson make to Thomas last year, like throwing it to him in a tight window between the corner and the safety and cover two. There's a lot of timing involved with that. It's got to be pretty perfect, and they sort of nailed that timing with each other. So I think their chemistry has likely had a chance to grow over the last, over this offseason and throughout summer workouts. That should continue, right? So I don't think that's a stretch. All right, other guys that I think are draftable. Certainly Dom Lovett is draftable. Had nearly 1,000 yards receiving in the SEC 2 years ago. He was Georgia's highest reception guy last year. I wouldn't be shocked if he's Georgia's first 1,000-yard receiver in a while, because he's going to work the middle of the field. And I think Georgia's going to have multiple boundary receivers for the first time in a while that can really kind of stretch the safeties out towards the sidelines more and more. Micah Morris, certainly a draftable player. Same with Dylan Fairchild. Those guys are kind of splitting that guard position right now, the right guard position, or they did last year. I'm not sure who's going to start, but both of them have traits that people love from a weight room, size, athleticism standpoint. Trevor Etienne, I don't think that's a stretch at all. He's going to be a drafted player. I don't think he's going to be playing college football after next year. Put him on the list. Dylan Bell, interested to see what happens with Bell. Certainly has the sort of the ball skills to play in the NFL, and he has great feet. I think Georgia wants to see him get a little more separation, but is he a draft pick type guy? Yeah, I think so. Oscar Delp, probably a draft pick guy. Now you got Jurasik too, from Stanford. I know Jim Nagy with the Senior Bowl really loves him. So I think he's draftable. So on offense, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 guys I just named. Arian Smith would be kind of a wild card, depending on how his last season of football goes. Similar, I would say the same about Xavier Truss. And then on defense, Michael Williams, Malachi Starks, those guys are first round potential for sure. Jalen Walker, I know he's just coming into his third season, so he would be an early entry in this scenario, but like the NFL pays guys that can get after the quarterback. And he has shown that he can get after the quarterback. So, yeah, I thought I said Ratledge, Craig. Did I not say Ratledge? I should have. I counted him in the 10. I have him on my list, but if I didn't, yeah, Tate Ratledge will definitely be a draftable guy. On defense, though, after Williams, Starks, Walker, you've got Smile Mondin. You've got Dalen Everett potentially. I know that some Georgia fans are going to be like, well, wasn't he sort of a weak link at times last year? And that would probably be too strong to say. Like, if you go back and look, he really didn't do a bad job at all at any point in the season. I mean, like, yes, he gave up some plays that Kamari Lassiter didn't, but the year before, Lassiter gave up some plays that Ringo didn't, right? Like that carousel spins. And I think that's one position where we have reliably seen for a long time at the corner position, like if Georgia can get you on the field early, then all that tape that they get from that first season gives them so much teaching material for the next season. And we see guys improve at that position a lot. And that, for a long time, that's kind of been the specialty. DB play has sort of been the specialty, I think, of Georgia staff when you have all SEC safety and Kirby Smart. Muschamp gained a reputation as a DB guy as well from a developmental standpoint. There's been, different corner coaches and stuff that have come into the program, but like that's just an area Georgia's done a great job with. So we'll see what happens with Everett this season. Obviously not everybody's going to go. Not everybody that can go pro is going to go pro, and generally Georgia actually in the last couple of years has done a really good job of talking some of these guys into coming back who could leave early, and they almost all improved their draft stock. But if you look at if you look at Everett last year, 54 targets, 29 receptions. The 54 targets was the most on the team by a few targets, but 367 yards given up total for a corner that played 14 games as a starter it's really not bad. It really isn't. And only gave up 69 yards after the catch. I think that's the reason why Georgia likes Everett, is that he tackles. So yeah, I'm a fan of, I don't know, fan would be too strong of a word, but like, I think that these narratives pop up about certain players and it's like, oh, well, this guy gave up a touchdown in the SEC championship or something like that, so he's the problem. And I think usually it's a little more complicated and nuanced than that. Ingram Dawkins is a wild card among wild cards to me. From like, he was a 5-star defensive lineman for a reason. Okay, there's a lot of guys that are like 6'5" and 250 or 260. There's a lot of guys who are 6'3" and 300 or higher. There are not a lot of guys who are like 6'5", 280. And that's what he is. I still think about his spring game, I think before the 2022 season, where like he was facing up against Broderick Jones, a first-round NFL offensive tackle, and he was speed rushing him off the edge and creating problems. He was moving the quarterback in the pocket because of the rush that he was getting. And this wasn't one rep. This was like something that we watched for a couple of drives in a row. I think that he's a really good player. I think he could be kind of this X factor that breaks out for Georgia this year and helps that defensive line have a little bit of a renaissance season. He's just got to stay healthy. He hasn't been healthy really the last 2 seasons. You saw him kind of play through pain against Florida last year and create some havoc in that game on Graham Mertz. But I just think you can't count him out as a draft pick. He's got the traits. I think the same would be true with, you got Stackhouse. This should be his last year. Coming into last season, there was people that thought he could be a 2nd-round pick or, sort of projected him there and then talked about him maybe even improving his stock above that if he had a really good season. Last year, I think he sort of adjusted to life without Jalen Carter, and that would be hard for any defensive tackle, but seems like he's had a good offseason. He's kind of gotten down a little bit in weight, looks a little quicker. I was impressed with him on G-Day, just kind of watching him at field level. Like, he just moved a half step faster than I thought he did last year. Obviously, that's a scrimmage, so we'll see what happens. But, again, definitely a draftable player, I think. And then other guys that I would say are draftable potentially, Warren Brinson. I think he got kind of a 5th to 6th round grade this offseason, decided to come back, but he's been a good pass rushing defensive tackle. I think if you can show that he can, play the run a little bit better, there's possibility for him. Julian Humphrey, similar to Everett, I don't even know if Humphrey's going to start. I think him and Daniel Harris are going to battle for that second boundary corner position throughout the season. But Humphrey has, I think he honestly may be Georgia's best cover corner just from a pure technical cover skills standpoint. Can he do the other little detailed things that he needs to do to show that every week? We'll find out. Dan Jackson, I know that Dan Jackson was a walk on, but like, look, the dude runs a 4.40 and he's got decent size. He's a really smart player, and there is a chance that he could be Georgia's starting safety in 2024. And if he's a starter on a team like Georgia, people are going to see his tape and start talking about him. We kind of saw that happen with Christopher Smith a couple years ago. Like, people would turn on Georgia tape to evaluate other players, and they kept being like, that guy's making a lot of really smart plays. That guy's got this play leverage perfectly, and he ended up being a mid-round draft pick, and it seems like he's doing well in the NFL. So, all right. Whew. Okay. The other one that I forgot to say on offense was Colby Young. He's 6'5" and 240, and actually, I'm not sure if he's 240. He might be 220, 230. 240 seems too big. Sorry. Probably 6'5", 220. I'll check that. Let's see. What is his weight? $220. All right, that's a little better. 6'5", 220. You saw him like mossing dudes in the spring game. I think that Colby Young could have a very big year for Georgia. So that's my answer to that. Craig, let me get to your question. You said if Monroe Freeling doesn't start at right tackle, can you think of any players who have made big strides in year 5 after spending 2 seasons as a starter? You're referring to Truss. Yeah, I'm trying to think in my head about past Georgia offensive linemen. Let me look at something real quick. I think that big strides. I don't know what you describe as like big strides, but I think you've seen a lot of guys for Georgia that get better every year. I don't know, if you're like, I don't think that Truss is going to turn into a first-round draft pick or something like that, but I think he's trustworthy. I think that the sentiment of your question is it, should Georgia want Xavier Truss starting at right tackle? And I think it's a fair question to ask. I do think the ceiling is probably a little bit higher for Monroe Freeling. Yes, Joe Burrow was a 5th year. That's a good point. Yeah, but that's a lot different than an offensive tackle. That's a struggle to kind of compare for me. But yeah, I think that you're looking at a guy with Freeling who, he's like 6'7", and he put on like 50 pounds. It's coming in at 284. I think that like he's another one of these guys. He's not one of these freaks that Georgia's recruited, and I would like to see him get on the field, but they gotta have somebody that they really trust at that position. I'll just be honest. I think Xavier Truss, Xavier Truss, in my personal estimation, I think he's really, really good against 85 to 90% of the opponents that Georgia plays. I think he can play guard against anybody and be super effective. I think at that tackle position, to this point in his career, we have seen him struggle when it comes to facing really, really high-end edge rushers, like first-round guys like the Dallas Turners of the world. They didn't eat his lunch by any means, but they would get a pressure or two and a half on him, and that can certainly be enough to affect a game or force a bad throw from a panic quarterback. Like, all of that stuff does add up in the aggregate. So don't want to be pretending like I'm dismissing that, but I, I do think that I would also be surprised if he's not the guy that trots out there as the starter against Clemson. But we'll see. Um, Craig, you said, I guess the real question is if Truss is still starting over you, what's the deal? Like him at guard, but he was getting something against Vandy at times. He was getting beat against Vandy at times. I mean, Freeling just a true freshman last year. And I don't think that, I mean, he's just been on campus now for like 16 months or so, 18 months, I guess. I'm not concerned about Freeling's development if Truss starts the year out at right tackle. We've seen Georgia for a long time kind of favor experience over ceiling at that position, but I also think that this could be a Warren Erickson situation. He started on the interior of the line a lot in 2021, but I could see him, become like he got replaced coming into 2022. Georgia brought Tate Ratledge along. They brought other guys along, and it was, I don't think Erickson ever would have started in 2021 if it hadn't been for the injury to Ratledge in that opening game against Clemson. I think that you're coming into this season. I think it's fair to say, I don't know if Truss would have started last year if not for the injury issues with Amarius Mims. Would he have rotated in because he's earned that? Certainly. But I wouldn't worry about that at this phase. I just kind of have a feeling that Freeling's probably going to emerge as the guy there. Or maybe Freeling starts out first few games of the year kind of on the Amarius Mims plan where he rotates in on the third series and then he puts a couple games of really good tape together, so, kind of flashes the athleticism, and it's enough to create the momentum to go with him as the starter. So we'll see. But thank you for the question. All right, moving on. We've got this done. We got that. We did the All-American question. Okay. Would love to hear more detail on the recruitment of Ladd McConkey. Did someone have their nuts on the line? Hold on, let me find the full question here. I can only fit so much onto the screen. Okay. Did someone have their nuts on the line that this no name was going to turn into something more than a practice squad player? Who found him? What were the anecdotal thoughts on his workouts with the staff? Who was the big advocate pounding the table saying UGA had to take him, etc.? Seems like the type of recruit who could hurt an evaluator's credibility if he didn't pan out. Imagine there are some stories about Ladd's offer versus other potential prospects who also would have accepted at the 11th hour. And that is from Brian Schottenheimer, HOF, Hall of Fame OC. I love that. Shout out Brian Schottenheimer for sometimes things got to get bad before they can get good. And he helped things get good for Georgia. Okay, so for Ladd, I think there was a time where this wasn't, where Georgia didn't want this known entirely publicly, but I think that he has said it now in some places, so I feel kind of comfortable saying it out loud. Ladd did not come to Georgia on an immediate scholarship, is my understanding. I think he came in as a walk-on and then quickly showed very quickly because, he came in that class of 2020 with Arian Smith, Jermaine Burton, and Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint. And by 2021 opener against Clemson, like I had people saying, this dude's going to be a big part of the game plan in this game. And I'm like, who? Ladd, what? So with McConkey, you got a kid who, with McConkey, you have a kid who came into the program and earned his way 100%. Like he beat first round DBs in practice and, like showed out early on. And everybody's like, who's this guy? his recruitment is an interesting story. And I think a lot of it goes back to the ripple effects of the Georgia's loss to LSU in the 2019 SEC championship. You go back and Georgia had the number one defense in the country all season, and they go into that game, and LSU obviously, you know, greatest offense of all time at that point in the eyes of many, and Georgia actually did a decent job with them defensively. It really did. A decent job with that team was giving up 37 points in the end, but Georgia did enough early in that game to be in that game from a defensive standpoint. The offense was totally anemic, and the final score was 37-10 in that game. Part of that anemia was that you had George Pickens suspended for the first half of that game because of the fight against Georgia Tech, and then you had Dominic Blaylock unfortunately blow out that ACL on this kind of crossing route where he tried to stop and plant. And when neither of those two guys were on the field, it was like, well, what do we do now, right? Fromm had struggled throughout the back half of 2019 and had kind of struggled, especially ever since Lawrence Cager got hurt. Following that Florida game, we didn't really see Cager again. And that had been the guy that Fromm kind of was comfortable throwing the ball to. You're in an SEC championship scenario against a LSU team with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and all these weapons across the field. And Georgia's trying to complete deep passes to Tyler Simmons and like some of these guys, Matt Landers, right? I think those guys were not bad players by any means, but they were not what Georgia needed to go toe to toe with LSU in that game. And I think it kind of exposed Georgia's wide receiver depth at that point in time. You had these two freshmen who were 5-star wideouts in Pickens and Blaylock, but the rest of the group was just not up to snuff. And there were some game planning things that went on late in that season for sure. That was Coley's only season as an offensive coordinator. The offense kind of got a little bit uninventive, but part of that was personnel issues. And, Fromm did just stop looking comfortable throwing the football downfield, kind of stopped looking downfield. If I'm not mistaken, I think they ended the Auburn game. They went up, I believe, 21-0 on Auburn that year on the road in Jordan-Hare with the division title on the line. They ended that game with like 8 straight 3-and-outs. Georgia did, could not stay on the field offensively. It was just hard to watch, truthfully. And so Kirby said on the podium in that 2019 SEC, after the 2019 SEC championship game, and said, we got to go out. We got to get more wide receivers. We got to sign more wideouts. We need better depth at this position. And over the next couple of weeks, Georgia goes and they get kind of commitments here in December from Arian Smith and Burton and Rosemy Jack Saint. Those are 3 of the top 15 wide receivers in the 2020 class. And everybody was celebrating that, and rightfully so. The kind of early enrollee part of the cycle ends, right? And all 3 of those guys, I think, were December enrollees. Maybe not Rosemy, but they all kind of were signed and done by the time we got to Christmas. And then you get into the back half of the cycle and players leave for the NFL and transfer out. I think Landers transferred out after that season, who, ended up going to Akron and then coming back to Arkansas and having a nice career, right? But anyways, the numbers got to the point where I think Georgia started to look at taking another wide receiver. At the time, you had scholarship limits that were much more real than they are right now, where, today NIL can kind of pay for a scholarship without having to use a scholarship. And that might change soon, but at the moment that is the situation. So I think that Georgia went out and they started trying to evaluate guys, and they had been watching this Ladd McConkey kid, and he'd been at camps, he'd been around. He was a Georgia kid from Chatsworth, kind of up in the northwest corner of the state, close to Chattanooga area. And Georgia just kept evaluating him. Around this time, Coley, had kind of that ill-fated season as offensive coordinator. Georgia hires Buster Faulkner, and he comes on board. And then Georgia also, shortly after that, they hire Todd Monken from the NFL after he had been with the Browns in this really dysfunctional situation where he was kind of neutered when it came to having any control over the offense. When Monken showed up, he was the guy that really pounded the table for McConkey. Todd Monken, looked at his offense, and historically his offense had a lot of kind of quick game passing concepts where you've got a lot of in breaking routes and you're trying to get a guy's balls in situations that they're going to be short easy throws for a quarterback, and the receiver is going to out leverage a defender and run after the catch. He looked at McConkey and thought, like, this is the piece that can potentially make my offense run on third down situations. He really, really liked his potential to work over the middle and really, I think, saw him and evaluated him as probably a slot receiver. McConkey gets to Georgia and his skill set kind of starts to flourish, and they realize, like, well, he's very capable of playing on the boundary as a Z receiver as well. And so in 2021, as that season wears on, Burton was dealing with injuries from fall camp on. There were times where he didn't play. And that Auburn game, McConkey comes in and catches a bomb on a double move against, I believe it was Nehemiah Pritchett. Because I remember in the lead up to that game saying, like, I don't know who it's going to be, but I think this Pritchett guy, Georgia can get off play action. And so they hit one double move to set up a touchdown on a slightly sort of underthrown ball from Stetson that McConkey had to wait on. And then they run pretty much a similar type situation, except for McConkey runs off on a post. And that one, Stetson puts on the money and McConkey strolls into the end zone, right? And from that point, it was on. I don't honestly know exactly when Ladd went from kind of like a preferred walk-on type status to a scholarship, a full scholarship. But it definitely happened quickly. And, I think it's notable that Georgia really laid out a path for him to do that and kind of, gave him an opportunity, or at least, showed him, like, hey, you can come in and do these things, then we will put you on scholarship. And clearly other schools didn't, right? He was a kid that grew up as a Tennessee fan. So it's not like, he had necessarily always wanted to be at Georgia and would, crawl over broken glass to get there like Stetson Bennett. Georgia gave him the best chance to get where he wanted to go by his estimation during the recruiting process. And it was either go there or, maybe go to UT Chattanooga. Right. So all of that really, worked out well for him, obviously. And he's had a great Georgia career. And then now he got the most guaranteed money ever for a 34th overall pick in the NFL draft. And Chargers are loving what he's doing in camp. But yeah, I would probably give a lot of credit to Monken, but I would also give credit to Kirby for listening to his new offensive coordinator. And Kirby got involved in that recruitment. Kirby went up to Chattanooga and, watched him play. I think it was in a basketball game in like January or February, and then sort of, offered him after that game, however you want to describe the offer. The narrative or the story there is a little confusing in some ways, for sure, though. All right. Moving on. What is your take on edges for the 2024 class? You mentioned Julius Holly in your recent update. And of course, we've been recruiting Isiah Gibson and Bryce Davis hard. Would we take all three? Yeah, I think Georgia would take all three of those guys. I mean, they're going to take Isiah Gibson if they can get their hands on him. As we talked about earlier, I think there's still some things to play out in his recruitment. Bryce Davis is out of Grimsley and Greensboro, North Carolina, which has kind of become a pipeline, would be too strong a word, but it's become a Georgia friendly recruiting ground. That Jamal Jarrett came out of there. Georgia's got good relationships with the staff. Particularly, Georgia has just recruited a lot of defensive linemen from that school. They tried to sign Travis Shaw out of there the year before they signed Jarrett. Shaw ended up at UNC, but I mean, he was a 5-star defensive tackle at the time. Like, was a big time player. Has kind of not totally flourished in Chapel Hill to this point, but I think that I really like where Georgia is with Bryce Davis. At the same time, it does feel like that recruitment just kind of keeps dragging along and dragging along, and Georgia has wanted him, and I think there's been a lot of times for a while now where it's like, we want you to go ahead and commit, and I don't know, you keep shuffling your feet on some of these things. Eventually, Georgia's kind of just, they got to fill numbers, right? Like, it's kind of like the Juju situation at quarterback. Like, do it or don't. You got to shit or get off the pot. So I think that at this moment, I still like where Georgia is with Bryce Davis. He was just on campus last weekend, but if we get like to August and he hasn't committed, I'm going to start thinking there's something more to that situation there. Just because, I mean, Georgia has been recruiting him since he was, coming into his sophomore year of high school, kind of thing. Like, they've been sort of, working him since they were working Jamal Jarrett in a way. I think with Holly, it's an interesting one for sure. I would say that he is a guy who UGA is certainly evaluated higher than the recruiting industry. I think one of the services has him as a 4-star, but he's not nationally ranked in the eyes of most. He's 6'3", 230, which is not probably the sexiest size for an outside linebacker or an edge. Most of the sports looking for that like lengthy 6'5", speed rush, pass rush off the edge, long arms. That's going to keep an offensive tackle off of them. I think Holly is more in that mold of what Georgia asked their jack linebackers to be, in that kind of Nolan Smith position, right? Is we need you to 2-gap against the run, and then we need you to be athletic enough to rush the passer on third downs off the edge as well. So it feels like UGA is maybe close to kind of closing the deal with Holly, which I think would be a good thing for them to do, because I think they did a good eval there and we're ahead of the industry, and I think he'll have a ratings bump and probably get more attention as time rolls on. But yeah, they would certainly take Gibson and Davis, and I think they would take Holly too. But it'll be interesting if enough dominoes start to fall. I could see some interesting things sort of happening in that edge class. Let's see. Do you like UGA to land CJ Wiley from Corey Williams? You know what? I wasn't planning on talking about this tonight, but since you asked and you were here live on the broadcast, man, I feel like that's the least I can do. So thanks for participating. I do like. All right, so this whole wide receiver class has gotten really interesting. Credit James Coley for all of a sudden kind of putting Georgia back into play with like all these elite high level wide receiver recruits. I think that 2 months ago, like coming into May maybe, or coming into April certainly, I would have told you I think Georgia's got a really great shot to land Travis Smith, and it felt like he was the one that Georgia was gonna kind of get it done with. Wiley sort of felt like a little bit of a reach, not not a pipe dream or anything like that, but it felt like a reach. And you're talking about a kid who's got LSU ties in the family, and I just thought that Georgia was not going to get that. I wasn't confident they were going to get that done. Today, I feel like it's the opposite. Today, I feel like Georgia recruited Travis Smith's ass off and just really, really worked super hard to have good relationships there and sell mom and sell dad. Like, Georgia did, I think, everything they can do there. But I think that some programs have come in with Smith sort of here, recently, and have made some intriguing pitches. And I think that there's look, Georgia's never going to be the highest NIL offer anywhere. I'm not saying that. I don't think Travis Smith is a kid who's just looking for the biggest bag or anything like that. But like, I do think these things are a factor in some of these decisions for sure. I think right now that I think Georgia's going to end up landing Wiley, and I think that Travis Smith's going to end up at Tennessee or Auburn, maybe Alabama. I don't know, but that's my current opinion on the situation. I reserve the right to change that in 24 hours or you know 2 weeks. I don't know. Well, Wiley will be committed by then, but I do think Georgia's going to get it done with Wiley, and I think that with Smith, it's interesting because they have all of a sudden gotten in a major way with Derek Meadows, who is 6'5", 200 pounds, the Nevada State track athlete of the year. I talked about him on the last episode. I even showed some of his highlights. Actually, I might still have those on here. You know what? There's some Derek Meadows highlights for you guys. Look at that. Yeah, I think Meadows is a really, really good player, and he's going to be one of those that high ceiling. I'm not sure that he shows up and immediately is ready to like run every route on the tree, but he could be the highest ceiling receiver in this class, and all of a sudden it seems like Georgia's like very in on him. So I don't know what's going to happen in the long run, but I think that there's a really good chance that Georgia gets two of the three out of CJ Wiley, Derek Meadows, and Travis Smith. And if that happens, and I don't have any reason to believe that Talon Taylor is not going to be there, but if that happens, then shit. I mean, that's the best. That's probably the best receiving class that Kirby Smart's ever signed, right? Maybe you could argue the Pickens Blaylock class was better, but you're talking about three guys that have like 5-star ish kind of potential at receiver, and two of those are true X receivers. True, if you got Meadows and Wiley, those would be two like of the types of receivers that Georgia really has not been able to land in the last few cycles. So I think there's a lot to be excited about with receiver recruiting right now for Georgia fans. Aiden asks, how many receivers do you think that Georgia could take in this class? I think it could be upwards. I don't think it'd be upwards of 5. Certainly 4 for sure. I think that they'll take, Taylor's in the bag. I think 2 of Wiley, Meadows, Travis Smith, if they can land, they would love to take them. And then you got the kid from North Carolina who, good Lord, why am I forgetting his name right now? What am I trying to say? You guys probably know who he is in the chat. He was just, Georgia has just kind of started really, really pushing hard to close him. But I do think that they're going to take kind of that more slot style receiver to complement these other guys. So I think that it'll Boulder. There we go. Good Lord. Sorry. Boulder is the kid's name. I think that they will end up there too. Aiden, I see you talking about Thomas Blackshear. I don't know if Thomas Blackshear is going to play receiver. Maybe he will, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up playing DB as well, or sort of how that plays out. He's definitely in that athlete category for sure. So we'll see what happens there, but I definitely think they're gonna get Boulder, and we'll see kind of how the rest goes. All right, what else do we got here? All right, I got a few early lines. You know what? I'm not going to get into this tonight. We're already at an hour. I'll save that for next show. Last question. What? Hold on, we got a typo here. There it is. Boom. All right. What is holding Sanford Stadium back from hosting a 2 to 3 day panic run? Watching scenes from the George Strait show at Kyle Field makes me wonder why we couldn't get 80,000 of us packed into Sanford. I think this is an excellent question. I've wondered about this myself for a while. So I am using my platform to advocate for Georgia. Bring home widespread panic. Do a hell. You don't even have to do a 2 to 3 day run. Do a one night show in Sanford Stadium. I mean, they they are a band that regularly sells out large venues. I think it could become a kind of cultural pilgrimage for some folks. Bring them back to Athens. Let them play in Sanford Stadium before they kind of hang it up and retire. And I'll be there. Shit, I'll promote it however you guys want me to for free because it would make me happy to do it and see it. I am going to see Watch for Panic at Red Rocks this weekend. So if any of you are going to be there, hit me up on Twitter or email me, Graham at Dawgs, DAWGS, Central.com. I'll be around. Would love to meet you if you're there. And that's all I got for tonight. I actually might do a second show this week, like maybe on Thursday. Let you guys know on the forums and put something out on Twitter if I do. But there are still some things I'd like to talk about, especially with some of these early lines. Maybe we'll bring on a guest to talk early lines. That would be fun. Let's do that. All right. Hope you guys are having a good week. Hope you have a good rest of the week. Thank you for being here. Please like this video or subscribe to the channel so you can get notifications when we go live. If you missed the live broadcast and you want to listen to an audio version of this show, there is a DawgsCentral podcast feed. It's Spotify, whatever your favorite podcast player is. Hop on it. We'll be there. Come check it out. Until then, y'all be well.